Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of WP Roundtable. I'm Jason Crawford down here in Medellin, Colombia. Kellen.
All right, joining you from the east side of Michigan, Metro Detroit area. My name is Kellen Mace, freelance web developer. Happy to be on tonight with an awesome guest.
All right, hey guys. I'm Kyle, coming to you from Jackson, Michigan, the greatest city ever. And I do WordPress stuff. And I'm really, really excited to have John James Jacoby on the show today. It's really exciting. John is a WordPress developer and an entrepreneur, and a big-time WordPress hero. You don't go far in the WordPress community without hearing about John and the work that he's done. And so, John, maybe you could just introduce yourself real quick and talk a little bit about your current status, what sort of things you're up to, and then we're going to start shooting questions your way. So get prepared.
Sure. So I'm coming at everyone from East Troy, Wisconsin. I guess the second greatest city in the world.
Go Packers.
Yeah, go Packers. As Kyle can and his entire family can attest to now.
Right.
Yeah, so I've been using WordPress since, I don't know, 2008, give or take. I think I registered or signed up for WordPress.org in 2008. And yeah, I worked at Automatic for a while. That was super awesome. Worked at 10up for a while, also very cool. Like to think I have made a lot of friends in the WordPress community, and get to speak at a lot of WordCamps, and just kind of genuinely enjoy learning anything that there is about any of the technologies that are involved in a typical WordPress stack, and try and do my best, I guess, to take my experiences and filter them out and try and help anybody else learn as much as I can help them learn about just it being as good of a PHP/WordPress engineer as I think that I can try and help anybody be. So that's I don't know, been very fortunate to have had that take me to some pretty cool places and introduce me to just a lot of really awesome people from different places that I think is pretty rare in terms of just technology communities in general. So I think the WordPress community has kind of just been very comfortable and very rewarding place for me to be. So I've stuck around. So that's, I guess, the spiel, right? Is the
Yeah.
And as far as, I guess, I don't know what I'm doing or what my day looks like, or kind of what I am up to. Recently, I've been working with the folks over at WP Engine and trying to get BuddyPress specifically kind of performing at what we would expect for it to perform using Facebook's hip hop virtual machine to replace PHP FPM to try and make it perform as well as they're able to make WordPress by itself run and some of the other more popular plugins inside of WordPress. So BuddyPress just seems to segfault under concurrent users pretty quickly. So just trying to track that down and see what we can do to benchmark and improve some of the way that BuddyPress performs there. And when I left 10up in July, was kind of to pursue a long-term kind of, I don't know, passion project of mine to do a WordPress.com equivalent for BuddyPress, right? Hosted social network, something that makes it very easy for someone to spool up a community site the same way that you would spool up a blog very easily on WordPress.com. And then I think that probably the most unexpected part of my 2014 year has been the Indiegogo campaign that has turned out to, exceeded my expectations pretty quickly. So lots of little things to talk about today, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I almost don't even know where to start. But yeah, so a lot of people know you for being the lead developer for BuddyPress and bbPress. So you've got a lot of background there, and in particular, that's what even when we announced that you were going to be on the show, I had people reaching out to me. In particular, someone named Shannon wanted to just didn't necessarily have a question, but just to thank you for taking the time after a talk at a WordCamp that you gave to sit down with her and help her with her website. So she wanted me to express that to you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so you have done a lot with BuddyPress and bbPress, and I really want to talk about your Flox project and the Indiegogo campaign. Maybe we could talk just for a minute about what got you into BuddyPress and bbPress, and what really what attracted you to these two projects, and brought you to this deep passion that you've been pursuing and taking on the lead role for both of those projects.
Sure. Yeah, they're BuddyPress and bbPress are they're unique, I think, in that they're both different approaches to I don't know, familiar experiences, I guess, right? What attracted me to them originally is kind of a funny story, because I ended up contributing and finding bbPress before WordPress. I ended up just looking, searching the web for a way to store a post or any piece of data in multiple categories at a time, which I think like typical forum software like PHPBB or VBulletin or InVision or any of the other, I guess, popular forum software at the time really couldn't do. And whatever it was that I found ended up being bbPress and its taxonomy structure, and just saw how simple it was, and it was really easy to get into, and it shared a data schema with MyBB, so it was an easy drop-in for other PHP forum software, and then kind of got introduced to BackPress and then BuddyPress at the same time, as I think Andy Peatling and BuddyPress had just been brought into Automatic around that exact same time, and really liked how simple that bbPress was, but didn't like that it didn't have robust kind of profiles or any activity logging or any of the things that back then in 2007 or 8 that you would kind of come to expect from something like PHPBB and VBulletin that already had a lot of that. But I really liked how simple that bbPress was, and found it really easy to contribute, because even back then it was still kind of a one-man show. I think Mike Adams had just kind of transitioned bbPress over to Sam Bowers at the time, and there was a woman, her handle was a fairly prolific bbPress plugin developer, her name was CK, and she was contributing very heavily to bbPress and BackPress at the time, kind of found it was a community that was fairly passionate about what they were building and trying to accomplish, and then found WordPress as a result of just wondering where does the rest of it fit in, right? Like blogging clearly is a thing, and how do you do that? So I came to it. I think I came in the back door, which is I think different than the way that most people first find WordPress and then bolt stuff onto it. So and then I think it was pretty clear to me that integrating all three of those pieces of software and making the experience as easy as possible was the only way that they would all survive together. And for me, I guess I've always thought of blogging and comments and the whole experience of installing WordPress and just having a blog as being, I don't know that selfish isn't the right word, but it is kind of a one-man show usually, and I think having a community behind whatever it is that you're trying to do has a tendency to speak a little bit more loudly. So the software that would power a community, I think, just feels more natural for me, and is something that I think is kind of it's nice to be able to graduate beyond WordPress once your community grows beyond comments. And comments have always been kind of funny because, I think when I had originally found WordPress and saw that comments were just a form that anyone anonymously could submit content into and have direct write access to your database through like a PHP script, kind of blew my mind. So turning comments off was like the first thing I did. Was like, well, no, that's clearly not going to happen here. And then letting sort of something that was kind of purpose built for that, like a bbPress and BuddyPress being again sort of purpose built for having people talk back and forth to each other in a controlled, at least somewhat controlled kind of way, felt a little bit more natural. So that's how I found them. And I, the thing for me was that contributing to the software is what always felt the most rewarding, right? Like building sites for clients. I mean, I'm not a sales guy, right? Like I'm not really the person that would go and, not your front man, I'm not going to go in and pitch and try and usually sell a big deal like that. But contributing to the software and improving it itself was where I seemed to get the most positive feedback from, and so I stuck with it, and eventually just patched as much as I could and did my best to improve as much of the software as I could. And if it was timing, or if it was if it was just volume or whatever it was good. It worked out well where Andy and Sam and other people that were sort of actively building those pieces of software, and even WordPress MU back in the day, right? I think of Donica, who was working only on WordPress MU. Just start chucking code at it as much as I possibly could, and eventually you get recognized for that, right? Someone says, "Well, when Andy was the barrier, when his ability to review patches on BuddyPress was creating inefficiencies for me to be able to continue to commit code or to contribute code in, then it only makes sense, right, to bring somebody in and provide them with commit access." And that's just like we did with Michael Beckwith on BuddyPress doing documentation, right? Like there's only so much that we can review and look at every patch, and before it just makes sense for someone to have commit access to just go and run with it. And so that, it was it just worked out, right? Where both of those projects they're very similar, and they're I think BuddyPress and bbPress are sort of more sister projects to each other than they are sometimes to WordPress, but they do complement each other really nicely. So it's nice, I think, to be able to make those pieces of software work so well together and works inside of WordPress as well as they do now.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So I've got some questions moving on to the next thing, but thought maybe you could talk just a little bit before we do about bbPress. I want to know more about what that is, what your involvement has been in it, and you're looking to get more involved, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But for those who don't understand, what's bbPress and where is it going?
So bbPress is glot comes from the word polyglot, which is really just a sort of a recognizable word and term used for to identify with internationalization and translating software from English into any other available language. So bbPress is the way that happens for WordPress core, and eventually the way that it will happen for all plugins and themes going forward on WordPress.org. So we've used it on BuddyPress and bbPress for a long time. bbPress originally had its own bbPress installation for translations and was translated into several languages fairly completely, and even is currently, but there's some quirks behind how .org works and syncing everything up with different releases, and BuddyPress and bbPress are pretty good guinea pigs for how that would sort of scale sideways into other plugins on WordPress.org. But my involvement is actually pretty pretty much none, other than contributing to the piece of software that currently powers GlotPress, which is something called BackPress. And anyone that knows me knows I like to talk a lot about BackPress because I really like it. But I think that GlotPress is sort of a funny piece of software now because everyone knows that it's powered by anyone that knows what GlotPress is knows it's powered by a piece of software that isn't really in development anymore. So I think a lot of people are afraid to contribute to GlotPress or afraid to touch it, or really not sure or confident on whether or not they should invest too heavily in the future of it, the same way that they do with WordPress or BuddyPress or bbPress. So because GlotPress has kind of been ignored by the greater WordPress community for such a long time, there's the most opportunity to do the most good there. There are people that have worked on it and have worked on it for a longer time than I have even probably worked on BackPress. So Marco or Nikolai, there are people that are beyond qualified to try and have the time to work more on GlotPress than I am. So it's not anything that I plan to do on GlotPress isn't meant to be in the face of anybody else that's working on it now, but is at least to try and come in and help with ticket triage, sort of some architecture, some implementation, some sort of 5-year roadmap kind of things that I've been able to pull off with BuddyPress and bbPress so far. So I think because what Matt has talked about in the State of the Word and some of the things that we're trying to do with internationalizing WordPress into more languages and making it easier, and is going to rely on there being more contributions to GlotPress, and I think just calling attention to the fact that it needs those contributions and trying to get some momentum going there is really most of my goals, right? To try and help out where I can for Marco and anyone else that's currently really eyeballing what needs to happen on GlotPress, and then to try and bring a little bit more awareness and make it a little bit easier to contribute for as much as I can.
That's very cool. John, I have a question for you. Going back to talking about BackPress, one of your favorite topics. I've listened to you on a lot of other interviews and heard bits and pieces of it. And one thing that kind of blew me away, or just really kind of sparked my interest, I guess, is some comments you made about how if things went a little differently, it could have ended up replacing what we now have as WordPress and use and are used to as the current version of WordPress. That kind of blows me away. I don't know a whole lot about BackPress, just that it's a set of PHP libraries. And why do you like it so much, I guess? Is it very performant or very efficient, or does it do things better than WordPress in some ways?
Not really. It's just it's WordPress without WP admin, right? Like you just don't have any of the admin area UI or libraries there, so you're free, or really without a lot of the posts table schema type of things. So you get users, you get a taxonomy, you get the fixed taxonomy structure and API that is sort of going into WordPress core currently, right? There's the term taxonomy ID and the term ID tables. There are column names that are kind of mucking up the WordPress releases for 4.1 and 4.2. Basically, the road to taxonomy term meta is paved with the tears and blood shed by what was already in BackPress 6 years ago. On a long enough timeline, right, where WordPress is powered by a completely RESTful API, eventually you could start thinking about what it would look like to transparently replace the things inside of WordPress that are lumped into one zip file or one tarball, and start replacing individual pieces of it with what would look like BackPress, right? Like it's not that it's more performant, but at least it was It was the application layer of all of the convenient things that WordPress provides, like WPDB, the rewrite rules, all the things that we kind of touch here and there, just abstracted out. So you could build forums with it. You could build something robust like WordPress with it. You could build something relatively simple like posts and pages with it, right? Like, it was super flexible and nice to have all of the things that you end up spending months rebuilding over and over again, logins and cookies and sanitization and escaping and validation, and all these things were just in BackPress. And even if you grep WordPress's code base, there are still references to BackPress in WordPress currently, like old libraries and comments and code documentation about BackPress where stuff was ported. It was built in BackPress first and then ported into WordPress later. So it was just nice to have an external library that was already powering a bunch of other sophisticated pieces of software, and then have that trickle back into WordPress later, right? There's also something neat about just thinking about what a truly pluggable, compartmentalized library would look like, right? Like, in order to integrate LDAP, like there are plugins and stuff for WordPress that make LDAP or Shibboleth or other login integrations relatively simple, but what if you wanted to legitimately replace posts or pages with a completely different experience in WordPress? You can't do it. It just doesn't work. But if you wanted to, you could build it with BackPress and then change the way that posts and pages and revisions and attachments and all of that worked, and build a completely different software with it. So there was something just really neat about the idea of having that foundation and then starting everything from there. But that's not the way that it panned out, right?
Yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question because I wasn't so clear on that as well. But so we got to move on to another topic here because we've got a lot to cover, and I want to talk about some things that are pretty relevant now. So Flox. I want to talk about Flox. So anybody listening, check out Flox.io. It's a new project that John's been working on. So I want to know, like, you wrote about some things related to this in a recent blog post. So you wrote your distributed blog post, which we'll link to. And I thought it was a great post, and a lot of people were talking about it after you wrote it. So I want to know, how long have you been thinking about making something like Flox? And first, we should probably define it a little bit, because as I understand it, it's kind of like maybe Flox is to BuddyPress as WordPress.com is to WordPress, or something like that. It's essentially a hosted solution for communities. Are we on the right track?
Yep, that's basically it. That's in our community, right? That's pretty much the best analogy that we can come up with. If you're going to compare it to something else, you might compare it to Ning, but not exactly, and you might compare it to like Yammer, but not exactly. Flox is purposefully private communities that are invite only. At this point, it's sort of mobile first experience that sacrifices a little bit on the web or on the desktop to provide a very native feeling mobile experience on Android or iOS, including an iPad UI. That I guess it does two things. Is one, it gives people a pretty low barrier of entry into understanding what BuddyPress can do, right? Very similar to what WordPress.com can do for WordPress. But two, we're pretty much accustomed to really big public social networks like Twitter and Facebook or Pinterest or Quora or and there are services like Ello that are kind of trying to be the anti-Facebook, that don't want to sell your personal information and and want to provide like a very pristine sort of social network experience. But the Flox, sort of the thing for me and the problems that I wanted to solve are, we talk a lot about how you sort of have a different personality on Twitter than maybe you do on Facebook, and you post certain things at certain places because you know that you have specific audiences on those networks. And Instagram was really nice because if you take a picture, you can push it to Flickr and Facebook, and you have all these archives of your content. But the types of things that I'm going to talk about with my wife are going to be different than who I'm going to talk about WordPress stuff with, or who I'm going to talk about some local computer club stuff with, and who I'm going to share stuff with just old high school friends or friends of mine that drive the same car or whatever. Like, you have all these different passion projects and groups where you do have a different personality in these individual networks. So I think it's important to partition those conversations so that they're relevant to each other. And with something like Flox, it's nice to be able to have a network and have a private place where you can post status updates asynchronously and have some very relaxed back and forth types of conversations using BuddyPress's activity streams, and then be able to switch to a different network and talk about planning stuff for work, or sort of talk back and forth about the things that you're accomplishing in the day or in the week. Very similar to like a P2 style theme, but specifically geared for mobile. So Flox is nice because you have a private invite-only network that you own, right? It's your social network that you control, so it's good for groups of teachers that want to talk back and forth about school stuff that is relevant to their interest at school but doesn't maybe necessarily belong in email or someplace else. And then having a separate network or multiple networks to switch contexts and switch which group it is that you're talking to, and have a completely different set of profile fields and maybe a different avatar, and talk about different things with a different group of people using the same account and the same interface. So on the surface of it, it's nice to be able to have those private conversations and control your own community. But once you start using it with multiple networks and start sort of transitioning between different groups of people to have different conversations is really where I think the power of Flox will eventually shine through. So I've got there's probably about 100 people and some isolated networks that are using it, not super heavily, but it's nice to be able to see how different people are using it, right? With different just families posting status updates using it like a bulletin board on a refrigerator or something, right? Smaller agencies or companies using it to sort of give status updates on what their day might look like. So there is sort of a nice wide array of people that are using it. It's nice to be able to control the flow of people coming in, which is a little bit of, if I remember the story correctly, of kind of how WordPress.com started also, right? It was really Matt having VIPs. It was him hosting WordPress for people that were close to him or that mattered to him the most. So Flox is similar to that, where I've got a few networks set up for people that I'm close to sort of watch how they're using BuddyPress, get some really good performance numbers and data on things that can be improved over time, and then make sure that anything that I see trickles back into the project as a whole. So the years of working at Automatic were tough because I wasn't really using BuddyPress on a daily basis. So it's nice to have touch there again, right? It's nice to be able to have something that is truly mine to be able to look at and see and watch and shape and hold on to, which I think was I was lacking at Automatic. So and it was nice to have projects at 10 Up. There were a few projects that I was fortunate enough to help out or be involved with, or just at least watch happen at 10 Up that were pretty big BuddyPress projects that they did a really phenomenal job on. But once you ship them, and they're kind of out of your hands a little bit, right? So, and I just think that in general, the concept of just having niche networks and hosting them for someone is a big deal. There's a big gap there. And hopefully Flox can eventually be the solution for that for people.
Yeah, I hope so, and I see tremendous potential there. So I want to walk through or understand a little bit, not simply your inspiration for this, but talk us through how long you've been thinking about an idea like Flox. How long has been this going through your mind, and what were like some of the signs, writing on the wall, you might say, or the inspiration points, those moments where you said there should be something like this, or maybe I'm the guy to make it, and then the moment where you said now's the time.
So the idea of doing hosted BuddyPress networks was like a day zero thing. I mean, it goes back to just seeing and using BuddyPress originally and knowing that one of its original intents was to power a lot of the current social features that are on WordPress.com now, right? The WordPress.com reader, some of the what has been very lovingly referred to as like the new dashboard on WordPress.com. Some of that stuff was originally, Matt's kind of original vision for the social part of what would get bolted onto WordPress.com, and there was and still sort of is the idea of having hosted forums using bbPress at Automatic. That was something called TalkPress, and that existed for a while. There were a few VIP customers that were on, hosted bbPress solutions, but when we rewrote bbPress as a WordPress plugin, and knowing that bbPress was powered by GlotPress, it became this thing that made it really difficult to invest in its future without knowing what that future was going to look like. So if we can do hosted WordPress, and then we know that we could do a hosted bbPress, then I don't see any reason why we can't do hosted BuddyPress, right? So I guess it was originally, maybe a little bit of a secret goal, but it would have been nice to have turned something like that around on WordPress.com VIP or something while I was there. But it just wasn't a thing that existed, and it would have taken too much time to build out when there was so much other, to be honest, just other more relevant to WordPress and just kind of neater things going on WordPress.com VIP, that trying to invent hosted social networks just is a lot of work for not a lot of gain that you could really pinpoint to. And when I had talked with Jake, because Jake at 10up has PushUp, they have product, right? They're a company that is primarily client services, but is trying to look at what product would look like. And so when I kind of gave him the idea of what I thought it was, and Jake and I had talked about that even years ago, when I think even before I had started at Automatic, on what that would look like. But it was something that Jake just knew I was passionate about, that he wasn't passionate about, and when I talked with him about it in June and July, it was kind of, okay, well, there's decent opportunity to try and put this together and give it a name and package it up and turn it into a real thing. So when it wasn't something that he was interested in doing, and it was still something that I was interested in doing, then why not run with it, right? I mean, it's something I wish I would have done years ago. So I may as well try and start it now and see what it turns into 5 years from now, I guess, right? So leaving 10up and then starting Flox was fun for a few different reasons, because really it had been a long time since I had done like full stack development, right? I mean, I'd kind of shoehorned myself into just doing WordPress plugins and theme reviews, deployments, code review, solving problems with plugins the way that I knew how to, but I hadn't really built a box in a while, or hadn't looked at what a true sort of modern web stack would look like. I mean, we used Varnish on WordPress.com, and they moved everything over to Nginx, and but that was all stuff that was outside of anything that I would have worked on, and so it was nice to look at actual technology that I hadn't had a whole lot of influence or experience with, and become familiar with it again, right? Like even though it took 8 hours for me to actually build my first Linux box in a long time, I can do it pretty easily now, and I sort of know the caveats and feel like I've learned a lot from doing that. And, it's been really fun. I mean, it's I guess I like to joke. Everyone sort of jokes about how WordPress is slow to adapt, and I don't think that that's true really anymore. But there are so many other modern, really cool web technologies out there that you accidentally ignore if your primary job is working in WordPress all the time. So, like switching over to MariaDB instead of MySQL, switching over to HHVM instead of PHP FPM, like little things that are like, well, we can run this on a little bit more of a modern web stack now, and push the envelope a little bit further than I would have been able to have done under a sort of typical Automatic or WordPress.com setup at the time. I know that now they do a lot of cooler stuff than what they were working on when I was there, and even at 10up, where we had some DevOps and SysOps guys, and at a directorial level, I really wasn't responsible for doing that kind of thing. So I don't know. Doing the full stack stuff for Flox was I don't know. It was rejuvenating a little bit. So it was really fun, and still is fun. But it was at least fun to do again.
Yeah, so on that note, we had a question come in from Sarah Gooding on Twitter, and I'm asking it now because you just mentioned it. She wanted to know, why did you go with MariaDB, and do you have any benchmarks to share? So just talk us through that decision.
Hi, Sarah. So I don't really have any benchmarks, and I wish that I would have taken some. It was it's actually really easy, almost too easy really, to switch from MySQL 5 to MariaDB 10. So it's pretty much a drop-in at this point, a drop-in and a MySQL upgrade, and you're mostly complete. So Flox doesn't really have enough traffic or server load where it was a necessary move for me. It was more spiritual, I guess, that there's something I find to just be comforting knowing that MariaDB is sort of GPL through and through, and outside of Oracle's influence, and I know that there are promises of performance gains and things in MariaDB, but Flox just doesn't have the load or the traffic yet to really have necessitated the move. It was more knowing that if I didn't do it now, that it would be a little bit more difficult to do 5 years from now. So it was more of a spiritual switch than it really was out of necessity. But I'll probably end up writing up something on my blog just to talk about what the switch looks like and what it looks like, at least in Ubuntu 14.10, because it was pretty painless, and there really isn't any reason not to switch, because everything, including BuddyPress and bbPress, on a multi-network install with all sorts of weird stuff bolted onto it, works exactly the same as it used to. So there was no problems with it at all.
All right, John, I got a question for you. Can you talk us through like a user experience, either as it stands now or as you want it to be with Flox? From like entry point, somebody showing up, and will they have access to multiple different communication sites or Flox points, or will it just be I sign into one and I'm in that one, have to sign into another, and what could a new user expect?
So that's a good question. Right now it's pretty poor, to be honest, but ultimately it's I guess kind of similar to what WordPress.com is, where it's single sign-on. You have one account. The cookies, currently, at least the way that it works, is the cookies that are dropped for the entire Flox installation. Every network on Flox is a subdomain, so similar to Slack or WordPress.com or something else. You'll get whatever you want, .flox.io, and if you switch between networks, then you're still logged in from network to network. I think one of the secret nice things about it is that they are literal WordPress networks. So each new network is its own multi-site installation of WordPress with shared user tables. So there is opportunity there for expansion in terms of plugins or themes, or the sky's the limit. But it turns out that nailing the experience of inviting users and having them accept your invitation and getting logged in, and having sort of a good entry point into a community that exists already is really difficult, right? Like Slack has done a really good job of nailing that, I think, where you have an email address, you go to wordpress.slack.com, you sign in, you create a password, and you're just in, right? Like there's something pretty neat about that. And if they won't let you into target.slack.com because you don't work at Target, right? Like there are lots of companies that use Slack that have private networks that you're not a part of. So I'll probably take a little bit of inspiration about, with the way that Slack has done it. And we have some UI and some things in BuddyPress today, like with groups, with group invitations and having public, private, and hidden groups, where a lot of that will probably end up being the default sort of, hey, I'm making a network, who do I want to invite to it, and how do they accept their invitation, and what does that look like? So we'll probably take a little bit of what's in there now, and then there are a few people that are working on improving it for BuddyPress 2.2, and then trying to improve upon what that ends up being, and sort of long-term trickling that back in and improving that whole thing. But it's difficult to nail down because each network is at least intentionally currently private. So what that looks like when you get invited into a private network and providing context for it when you have never seen what this thing is before is really bizarre. So right now, my goal is to kind of keep it pretty simple and not try and complicate it with too many sort of tutorials or click here, here's what to expect, here's the next thing, here's what to expect, too many multiple steps. And for the networks that are there and for the users that are using it, there aren't a whole lot of people really besides myself that have multiple networks. But when that happens, I think just having it be as similar to creating a site on WordPress.com as I can make it is really going to be basically the MVP of calling it complete and shipping it so that people can create networks freely and invite people to them as freely as they can. And I'll probably end up changing the pricing model and stuff like fairly significantly once there's real paid upgrades on it versus having people pay for network access now. But right now, paying for network access works because it's the only way to make any sort of income off of it to continue supporting it. So,
it's all good stuff. John, I had a question for you. I was kind of wondering about when I think WordPress.com, I think kind of tightly controlled multi-site network in terms of theme availability and plugins that can be used and things like that. On Flox, if I have a niche community and sign up for the service, are you doing something similar where you have kind of these specific plugins and themes you can select from for your?
So right now, at least right now, the way that it works is no one that is currently using Flox actually ever sees WP admin. They create a network through a dedicated UI on flox.io to do it. They can manage their paid account or their subscriptions on flox.io, but otherwise there's an app or like a HTML app, like a web app to switch between your networks and talk back and forth. I have an iOS wrapper for it, just as like a web view. that sort of helps create the sort of native look and feel of the nav bar and the status bar and stuff. But there's nothing that would, at least currently, actively prevent it from being something more sophisticated, right? I think one of the things that at a certain level on WordPress.com, you're right that you can't just bolt your own code on top of it and run off. But with Flox being true networks and multiple networks that are just kind of clones of one default network install, very similar to either like a WordPress.com VIP style model where you could have custom code running on it that lived in a separate repository that was pulled into specific sites. We could do that for an entire network, right? In every individual Flox network has the opportunity to be its own WordPress.com at that point, right? So it's really taking a little bit of what I had at least I think I learned at Automatic and how they have scaled WordPress to power what they have on WordPress.com, and then trying to simplify as much as I can, and while at the same time leaving it a little bit more open-ended to enable things like what you're talking about.
Right.
And
so each probably case by case at this stage.
Right. So if someone really wanted to, like, let's say, I think the example that I've been using, right, is like if Subaru knocked on my door and was like, hey, we want to have a WRX network, and we want it to be this color with this header with this experience and these things, that'd be awesome, right? Like, yes, how do we make that happen? And it wouldn't take a lot to make that happen, to give them a repository, to set it up so that it deploys only for the network and so on. So yeah, it wouldn't take much. And let's say, like, I might have said this to Pippin or somebody else, but worst case scenario, right? Like, let's say that Flox ends up being a thing that just can't, for whatever reason, ever make any money. Then I open source all of it on GitHub, and the server costs and everything are pretty small. So now we have a true open source social network that people can actively build on their own and contribute to. Like, how cool would that be, right? Like you can actively help build a social network and do code review and manage deployments on something that is hosted on a few servers in the data center, and we can scale sideways on the hardware side of it if we really needed to. So if it's something that, for whatever reason, it just truly ends up not being a viable product, either in the world or that I can pull off, then at the very least it was a fun thought experiment, and then we get to open it up to the world and let them have it, right? Yeah. So
I have one other one I'll interject real quick. I'm just curious about, if you have communities of folks using these services, what about their content and privacy issues?
Sure.
Think about services like Dropbox and all the certificates and things that they have to just to prove to some companies that yes, we are permitted to store your HIPAA confidential info for medical communities, right. Things like that. Those kinds of thoughts arise. I don't know if you had some groups come through, would you have to turn them away at this point if they had some sensitive information that they're going to be sharing on your network?
Probably. I mean, I guess I'm not super educated enough with all of the ins and outs of HIPAA and things to know whether or not it would. I mean, the one thing that I think that would be interesting would be to start encrypting data for networks so that it's not visible by me or somebody else to just read it in plain English, right? So right now it's just stored the conventional WordPress way, right? Using the exact same WordPress data schema and BuddyPress schema that anyone can sit there and use. So private doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't mean encrypted. It doesn't mean secure. It doesn't mean anonymous, right? Like even services like Yik Yak have proven that just because it's anonymous doesn't mean it's really anonymous, right? Like they can still they still know who you are. So having a private network doesn't necessarily inherently make it more secure. Flox is as secure as I think I can make it, speedy to SSL all the way, because I'm not doing any domain mapping, at least not yet. So it can be properly sort of locked down, so that I can allow and disallow, YouTube embeds, but not embeds from someplace else, right? So there's not a whole lot of leakage into anybody else's referrers for things that we're pulling in or auto-embedding. We could do a lot of those things if we really, truly wanted to, or if somebody needed it. And if it was something that somebody was interested in enough for there to be value in spending the time to try and make Flox a service that worked that way, then why not, right? But today it's as locked down as I know how to make it be, and if there's anything that eventually comes to pass to make it more so, then I would do it, right? Especially, if it's a bug or if it's something else, then yes, right? Clearly, we would want to fix it, but yeah, that's, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks.
So, John, we're really cruising through here. This is a lot of interesting material. I want to talk now about your crowdfunding campaign a little bit. So, for those who don't know, a month ago, roughly, you opened up a campaign on Indiegogo.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll make sure to link to that and share that with everybody, because it's still active until this Thursday. This campaign is to essentially crowdfund your full-time dedication to the BuddyPress, bbPress, and GlotPress projects. And I want to know two things. A little bit about the inspiration for this idea. Who gave you this idea, or how did this idea come into your head that I could, I want to dedicate myself to these projects, that I'm obviously the perfect person to do. That's my opinion. I think you're the perfect person for these projects. I want to do that full time, but how can I do that? How can I make that a reality? So what inspired this? And also, is there any precedence for somebody else doing something like this in the open source community? Have you heard of someone? I've never heard of an effort just like this before. So just let us know how that came about.
So I know. So Jenny Wong, that works at Human Made, brought up the idea of doing an Indiegogo campaign at the WordCamp San Francisco Contributor Summit, or the WordPress Contributor Summit in San Francisco. I guess a few ways, I guess, like you could kind of try and spin that, but I was originally pretty hesitant about the idea of doing a campaign for this kind of thing, because even as much as I enjoy working on BuddyPress and bbPress and improving it, and see that there is an enormous amount of potential and need for GlotPress to be a piece of software that our community is confident in investing a lot of time and stuff into. I was kind of concerned that my I don't know, like there's something, one, there's always something weird about asking for money, right? And two, I think I was worried that it would be too easy to say, like, hey, like, these projects aren't doing well enough on their own, and someone's got to pay to make it happen. Like, I didn't want for anyone to sort of conflate my need to pay the bills with the success of any of those pieces of software, right? So Jenny was really kind enough to do some proofreading with the campaign, and when she had brought up the idea at the Contributor Summit, everyone seemed pretty responsive to the idea, right? And so if it wasn't for that, right, if it wasn't for that initial support from everyone that was at the contributor summit, it probably would have just been a thing that I would have said, well, like that's a cool thought, but no way, right? So knowing that everyone was like, yeah, if you did that, I would totally get behind it, was really where the original kind of, oh, maybe this is a thing that's worth doing kind of idea came from. And I don't know that there is anything that I've seen anything too similar to this approach specifically. I know Jenny had mentioned that they did something for one of the PHP core contributors, but I don't know that it was for like a dedicated period of time, but that it may have been for maybe just getting through something, or helping pay for something specifically, versus focusing on the software for a specific period of time. So I would be pretty shocked if somehow I'm the first person to have tried this and somehow pulled it off. That seems a little weird to me, but it seems like that might be true. And if it is, I think that there's opportunity for better engineers, or different pieces of software and with different projects, that there's opportunity for other people to work on other things in a similar way that deserve it, that I would like. It would be really cool if this sort of provides that opportunity to other people to consider that as a plausibility, right? If someone really wanted to work on PHP core for a little bit and needed the cash to do it because they weren't able to do it any other way, it'd be neat for them to look at this and say, if he can do it, then maybe I can too, right? Like, that's pretty cool. And I think that, thinking bigger, because I think like some of the questions that would come up with what to do if the campaign goes over the 50,000 that I was hoping to get, and it has, right, by a little bit. So if all of a sudden it was able to raise $100,000, what do you do with that extra money, right? Like, I think it would be really neat to be able to have a foundation, or have something that kind of sits idly in the background. And if an independent WordPress developer, if Boone Gerges needed to work on BuddyPress or WordPress core full time, to have there be a foundation that someone could ask for a grant for, or something, or if someone has an emergency, right? An individual or a contractor that's a prolific contributor to something, breaks a leg and needs money to pay for a surgery or something, to know that there is a foundation there that exists solely and independently to help individual contributors get through times like that, I think would be a big deal. So, the Indiegogo campaign for me is really nice to be able to, it's nice for me to be able to work on the software that I love and that I enjoy, and it's unbelievable the amount of support that the WordPress community has shown me. But I think there's such an enormous opportunity to be able to take what a campaign like this represents and package it up and turn it into something that symbolizes something even bigger. So yeah, the Indiegogo campaign's been really awesome.
Well, I just wanted to know how you really, how that made you feel to know that you have that much support within the community, that you can just go out there and say, hey, I want to work on this for 6 months, but I need $50,000. Who wants to support me? And to get that kind of support and be done early.
It's I don't know, unbelievable, right? It's hard. It's hard to find the words for that, right? Like, like, especially for software, right? Like, it's not like I'm not building something. I'm not out putting up walls, and like, it's maybe I don't know. Maybe we kind of are, but it doesn't. I don't know. It's different because I enjoy working on WordPress and the BBs and stuff so much that it's like I don't know. It's like a bunch of just thank yous and big warm hugs all in a row to say like it's okay. You can go totally do this, and we're totally cool with you doing it, right? Like I don't know. It's just it's really cool.
It's really cool, and there's a lot of trust. I think
Definitely.
it wasn't. I think it's really says a lot about your role in the community and how so many people see value your contributions, and that it wasn't like you outlined in tremendous detail what you're going to be doing for these 3 projects, but everyone without question says, we trust your judgment, John. You do what these projects need. I mean, what do you think about that?
It's awesome, right? It's in a way, the WordPress community is kind of funny. I know like Matt catches a lot of flack, right, for kind of being the business leader behind Automatic and Audrey, and being the spiritual leader behind WordPress core, and how that, and running the foundation, and I think that's too bad, because Matt's a pretty smart guy, and he really wants to do good and tries to do as good as he can with everything that he has influence over. And my experience with him, I mean, he's left a mark on me in terms of what it means to truly kind of contribute and give back and commit yourself to the greater good that you can do with the GPL and open source software. And I think I've been able to successfully do that for like one reason or another, and the Indiegogo campaign, I think, sort of, I don't know, it proves that pays back, right? Like if anyone was worried about what it meant to contribute to WordPress core, to any open source software, and what you would actually really get back out of it at the end, it's only been like six years of me using it. It's, it was like a pretty small percentage of my career and life at this point. So I think that when Matt says stuff like he started open sourcing WordPress, and it's been awesome ever since. I believe it, right? It's absolutely true. So sometimes it can be tacky and it can sound a little trite, but I don't know. I think if you're free and open to, theoretically giving stuff away and seeing what comes back, if you stick with it and you're fairly committed to it and believe in it and for what it is, then I think it does work out. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
yeah. Well, it's really interesting. It's to me, well, especially when we look at our little WordPress community, which isn't so little, but in terms of the grand open source community, I don't know of a lot of precedents for this, and I think this is kind of uncharted territory for WordPress a little bit. And I wonder, what you think about what's next. What message does this send the community and other developers and other people out there who contribute to these projects? And what are we going to be? I wonder about what we're going to be talking about in a couple of years when we look back and we rewatch this interview or read about your campaign and say, it started there with John starting this campaign. And what are we going to talk about? Just what message does this send people, and what's going to happen now?
Well, either one, it's a complete fluke, right? Like one, it's the only one of its kind, and no one's ever able to pull it off again. That doesn't seem likely to me at all, but that, I guess, right, is an option. I think it's more likely that you'll end up with a Stephen Edgar or Jared Atkinson or Bill Erickson or Pippin Williamson. You'll end up with someone who has lots of experiential knowledge and lots of ideas and things that maybe they want to contribute to or build out, or something they want to learn, or someone they want to learn from, and have the opportunity to put together a campaign that helps them do that from a community of users and supporters that want to help those people succeed, right? One of the fears of the campaign was that businesses might see contributing to me as sort of their 5% cop out, right? Like instead of contributing to WordPress or contributing 5% of their week to WordPress, they would just help me do that for them instead. And I don't know that has happened, but I was worried about that too, right? Like I don't want to. The goal really is to get as many people doing as much good towards the thing that they care the most about, and not to detract from that. So there are lots of plugins and themes that could benefit, right, from a month or two of full-time development to just get it over that hurdle, right? Whatever it is that is either preventing them from shipping it, preventing them from feeling like it's their best work or whatever. I don't think that it would take very much, right, for someone who has a positive reputation for doing a lot of good and for helping a lot of people out to put up a campaign and say, hey, either I need this much to do this good, or I tried doing something and it didn't work out, and in order for me to recover, we've got to do this. I mean, whatever the reasons are, I think this campaign sort of helps prove that if it's something that you have a reputation for doing good work with, that you sort of own, that everyone knows is in your wheelhouse to take on, and you ask them for help to do it, that they will. So I hope that we see more of this, right? That this is an opportunity to help other people in the WordPress community or beyond it to try something similar and give them some time to regroup or focus or get some things done that maybe they weren't able to do someplace else.
That's pretty cool.
Cool.
We're just about at the end of our time here and going a little long, but that's okay. We're having to skip over 90% of the questions that we wanted to ask, but that's fine. You will just immediately go back on my schedule of people to ask to come on the show again. So I hope that wouldn't be too much.
Always happy to do it.
We appreciate it, because there's just so much more that I'm curious about. I feel like we're scratching the surface here, but yeah. We had a question about WordCamps that you'll be attending in the future. Where can people expect to bump into you in person? You participate in your local meetup community. You have WordCamps on your agenda for 2015 that you are not going to be missing?
I mean, someone just announced WordCamp Maui, right? Like, that looks pretty cool. I don't know. Yeah, I'm probably not going to go, but that seems pretty baller. I think that would be fun. I like the Midwest ones. I'm from Wisconsin, so the Midwest ones are pretty home for me. If anyone's nice enough to put together a buddy camp, or I've always thought about maybe a bbPress camp would be kind of fun. Any of those I would probably make a special exception for, but the Midwestern events are the ones I think that are they're generally a little bit smaller. They feel like like kind of an original WordCamp with a smaller group of people and the opportunity to hang out and meet. I feel like you meet more people that way and make a bigger impact. So if there's Michigan ones, right, coming up, then those are easy enough to go across Lake Michigan and go hang out. And Chicago, Milwaukee, Ohio. Providence is always nice. I lived there for a while. Miami, as much as don't really love Miami, at least David puts buddy camps together there, so it's worth going to buddy camp. Miami is always fun. I'm curious to see what the plan is for San Francisco next year, or whatever that event ends up turning into.
USA.
Right. So yeah, I don't really have anything I know what there's Midwest PHP is in Minnesota this year. I forget when that is. I think it's in March. Not a WordCamp, but a PHP conference. I think would be fun to go to. And then the WordPress meetup, I actually haven't been to one of the WordPress meetups in Milwaukee in a while. So we do a computer club meetup where we talk about all sorts of other random stuff here in East Troy. Talk about drones and microcontrollers and all the little doodads and things that aren't WordPress, just to talk about something else for a change. A friend and I, we've talked about trying to do. We'll probably start doing a little podcast with just us talking about random stuff that we see on Hacker News or whatever else, just because we tend to have opinions about things that we think someone might be entertained by. So we might try and do something small like that. But I don't really have any specific events that I can think of. I really wish I would have been able to go to Orlando. That looked like a fun event. But I had other stuff going on, so I didn't end up going. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know, and I'll come to whatever Michigan ones you guys are putting on.
All right, we'll hold you to that. Actually, are there any new talks that you plan on putting on? I know I've seen you speak a number of times, and I always enjoyed your presentations. Always very full of information, and ever since the first time I saw you, the first time I encountered you, you were throwing together just the most random impromptu presentation on NetBeans for everyone, and it was great. The audience was just completely engaged. And since then, I've seen you many, many times. But there's a lot of things that you like to talk about. Are there any talks you're preparing for 2015?
It's tough now because there are so many people that are doing such good talks that are really in depth about so many different parts of WordPress, and I go through phases, right, where I like talking about how I work, or at least how I feel like I manage to stay productive, or just different individual tools that I would use, or funny little quirky things in WordPress that I think are just kind of fascinating, rewrite rules, or multi-network, or HyperDB, weird little things. But I'll probably start talking more about BuddyPress and bbPress again, because I feel like those kind of talks end up being pretty rewarding for people that aren't super familiar with them, and there's a lot to cover there. So I think I'll probably try talking about what we're doing with newer versions of BuddyPress and bbPress, and maybe how we're leveraging some newer WordPress APIs and those kind of things. And I don't know, there's something fun about kind of asking what it is that people want to hear something about, and then turning that topic into a WordCamp talk to help others. So if you guys have any ideas, or if you wanna put something out there, then I'm happy to yield to an audience of people that want to hear me talk about whatever they want. So.
Oh, I've got no show to divide. I would come to hear you just talk about how you find all your great sweaters, honestly. But I could probably think of tons of ideas.
I like cardigans. I like pockets. I don't like stuff in my pants. Like pockets in my pants pockets. It's nice to have cardigans with pockets in them. That's pretty much the only answer.
Oh, all right. Well, that's just another trademark, I think.
John, I have one more, if I can interject real quick.
Sure.
I was wondering how you plan to split your time. Just jumping back to all the things we talked about. tonight between the Indiegogo campaign to spend so much of your time on those three projects that you're passionate on working on, and then also you have Flox, this big undertaking as well. And Indiegogo, you were using the term full time. So I'm wondering, how does Flox, fit in there? Which is your,
Right. So
primary, I guess.
So there's Flox is something that started in July and took until about September to really turn into a thing that was alive and something worth presenting. So since September, I've been working on pairing up with a couple of different companies to start doing some of the VIP style Flox experience networks that we've talked about, where the goal would be to staff Flox based on those clients and have a few engineers that are there working on it full time so that it is able to hum along on its own, while I focus on building out BuddyPress and bbPress and GlotPress for those 6 months. So for me, it's pretty important to keep a pretty strict separation there, because without it, it kind of, you're right, it all kind of easily gets a little fuzzy, right? So,
Gotcha.
So it's pretty important to me that there is someone there to be able to work on Flox with me, able to provide some insight and oversight to Flox as a business versus me as an individual contributing. And then Flox being really my first real startup is it gets to be a real company, right? That has its own bank account and has its own payroll and is doing its own thing. That whereas me as an individual gets to just work on the things that are outstanding bugs or issues or features or initiatives for BuddyPress and bbPress and GlotPress that have just been hanging around for a while, knowing that Flox will kind of just inherit those things for free eventually, right? So it's not that there isn't any overlap. It's just that the separation of church and state is pretty critical. So hopefully that anyone that sees me working or contributing on the open source end of it sort of understands that there is that overlap, but knows that they are sort of purposefully partitioned, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Good question. All right, John, we're about there. I don't want to take up your whole evening. I know we said we'd keep it to an hour. We're a little over that, but there's just so much we're curious about. We really appreciate you stopping by here. And
super fun.
I did want to ask, I'm pretty curious, and we ask every guest this, if they have any recommendations of other people that might make a compelling interview that we should ask in another episode.
Oh man, I think I mentioned a ton. I don't know who exactly has all been on the show, but right, I mean, Pippin Williamson comes to mind. He's prolific and all over the place. I know he has his own podcast, but I think, right, we're all friends here, so
yeah. He's been on.
The Chris Lima is a very obvious one. Jake Goldman, John Ekman. Gosh, who else would be awesome to have on? Andrew Norcross, right?
Right.
Man, I feel like this is like the who do you think when you're accepting an award kind of thing, right? Brian Richards, WP Session. Oh man, I'm gonna go to. I mean, Stephen Edgar, as much as I know that he's on the Aussie time, so his time zone is a little skewed from the rest of us. But he's super. He would be super interesting just because he doesn't. I mean, up until recently, I don't think has really considered himself to be an engineer by trade. So his contributions to bbPress are pretty awesome, and he kind of learned a lot about PHP from using bbPress, and So he would be interesting because I don't know that he's done a ton of interviews. I don't know how comfortable he is doing them either, but you may be able to pull him in. Ryan McHugh, right, and Rachel Baker on the REST API. Even Michael Beckwith, who's started doing documentation now for BuddyPress, works at Web Dev Studios. It'd be interesting to hear what his take is on what the experience of contributing looks like and core commit and everything. Boone Gerges, clearly. Paul Gibbs. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I got a whole ton I could list for you.
I know. You've already listed more than anybody else has. And a lot of those people are already on my list and have either been on the show or have been asked or I'm going to reach out to them soon. But those are some good suggestions, so thank you for that.
Anytime.
Yeah. So I guess we got to wrap up as much as I'd like to keep chatting. My wife's waiting for me to watch the Packers game. And I want to let you go enjoy your evening. So thank you very much, John, for joining us on the show. We really, really appreciate it. But we should also get the reference to this podcast of yours because I'm curious about that. We should link to it. So
I'll get you a link once we have one.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll look for that. Thank you. All right. So thanks again for joining us. It's been great. We'll be sharing this soon. We'll have lots of links in the show notes of everything that we talked about. And for anybody listening, I definitely recommend that you read John's latest blog post on his blog. And that you also, before Thursday, will be your last chance to contribute to John's efforts on the Indiegogo campaign. We'll have links to that, but they're pretty easy to find on the web. So thanks to anybody who's watching. Thanks to people who ask questions. And it's been a great show. This is episode 35, and we're out.
Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
thanks a lot, John.
Thanks a lot, John.
It was awesome.